But if you go back 2015, I think it was, Soros did a big document on the WEF website and published elsewhere, where he calls out how Europe must take millions and millions of migrants from East Africa and Africa and all these places in the coming years. And it's an imperative. And he even lays out how the EU has to put aside 15,000 in 2015 money for each one and start putting together a multi-billion-dollar budget for this because it must happen. Now, he couches it in all the talk of saving granny and all the other nonsense. You know they're lying through their teeth. But
Yes.
hey guys, I'm going to be in the UK in Ledbury region on 29th, 30th, I think, of August coming, 2 weeks, roughly. But today I got to talk with Dr. Teck Khong, and he's a GP in the NHS with over 40 years experience, now retired, but he became a Conservative candidate and also set up a party for freedom-focused kind of strategies, which we all need badly. So great to see you, Dr. Khong.
Good to see you, Ivor. Good afternoon.
Excellent. And I might let you give a little more flesh out that background, but we really want to get into what's going on and what we need to do about it.
Yes, well, I came into politics rather late on in my professional career. It was about 15 years into my career that I realized the people weren't getting a fair deal. And doctors were getting more and more restricted in the way they were allowed to practice. So it was a normal situation. We were trained to care for patients, yet there were a lot of management rules and guidelines coming in between the profession and the patients. So I became quite upset, and one of my patients was a council leader for the Conservative group, and she suggested, because I was rather passionate about patient care, that I should enter politics. Well, that was a bit of a unusual thing for somebody to say to me. I trained as a doctor and I wanted to carry on doctoring, not do politics. Anyway, a few years passed by, and this lady, the late Anna Pullen, came back and said, "Well, what do you think? Or what have you thought about politics?" I said, "Well, it's getting quite difficult." So she said, "Look, let me introduce you to some party officials, and we'll take it from there." And I was introduced to Oliver Heal, Sir Oliver Heal, who was the then chair of the Select Committee on Health. Sir Oliver liked what he heard, my proposals for the NHS, and suggested I sit the Parliamentary Assessment Board exam for the Conservative Party. And I did. I mean, I wasn't particularly bothered which party it was. My passion was to actually get the health service right, the health delivery system properly sorted out and configured for care delivery. So to cut a long story short, within a year, I was setting up the policy forum on health for Andrew Lansley, who was then Shadow Secretary of State for Health. And things got on from there. I became more involved. I stood in a couple of elections. But the difficulty was I was eventually becoming more and more out of sync with the party, because here I was trying to promote patient care, and then along came the EU referendum, and I was very keen that we asserted our sovereignty. And I found myself as deputy chairman of Harbour Division that I was being an outsider. I mean, the majority of the people in the executive board were Remainers. So I eventually left under the persuasion of a few people. I was delisted from the Conservative Party, and I joined UKIP for a very short time and stood in the same constituency, but unfortunately didn't have a good result. So I was going to leave politics. But there were people around me who said, "Look, because of your experience or insight in health, perhaps you should stay on, and we'll support you." So I went on to stand a couple more elections, and I was asked to lead the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom a couple of years ago, and here I am.
Excellent, Dr. Khong. So the Alliance for Freedom Party that you're now in and you're leading indeed, what are the main kind of top 5 things that you're focusing on or you're driving for? And we get into the challenges, I guess, when you summarize those and what's actually going on those fronts.
Yes. Well, the founders, the 5 founders of the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom, they were veteran politicians. And the head of it was somebody called Mike Hookham. He's now the president of the group. Mike Hookham was an MEP initially with UKIP, and then we have Keith Lonsdale, Paul Goldring, Ernie Warrender, who was one time interim leader of UKIP. And all these gentlemen came to realize that going forward, there was no party in the parliament that the people could rely on to deliver the service they require, or even have the interests of our country at heart. So they set this up, and they set it in a very unusual way. They decided at the outset that the term alliance should be in the party name, so it was alliance, meaning we would be gathering all sorts of independent parties, smaller groupings, activist organizations, even independent candidates. So alliance was the first word they chose. Then there was democracy, and our democracy is very badly corrupted and subverted. And the driving force, the vision we have long term, is the people's freedom to choose, freedom in terms of bodily autonomy, freedom to pursue all laudable endeavors, and so on. So we have this new party, which really is a mix of party, individual candidates, and interest groups. And going forward, we don't have a whip. So we impress on our candidates that the people who elect them, if they ever get elected, are their whip. They have to listen to the electorate. So we don't operate a central party whip. We have a dedication to serve the people, and our primary goal is the reassertion of the ascendancy of our country and the preservation of freedom for our people.
Perfect. And freedom is a massive challenge for all of us since 2020, particularly. That's for sure. But we might talk a bit about what's going on in the UK at the moment. I mean, it's quite frankly, it's nuts. I'll be over there in a couple of weeks in the Ledbury region, giving a couple of talks. Should be fun. But yeah, what's going on? Two-tier Keir. The crazy response to the natural people's anger is to talk about, of course, surveillance and digital IDs. It's always the same, always goes the same direction. So what do you reckon about what's going on in the UK at the moment? What's behind it and where it's going?
I think the trend is very sinister. It is, we're heading towards a very authoritarian system. We have something so arbitrary. The deaths of the three young girls in Salford was really the spark that ignited a lot of people's dissatisfaction. And the government preferred not to listen to the people's woes, concerns, and grievances. Now, to say that, people who want to voice the grievances are potentially guilty of being far-right activists, I think is such a cruel, anomalous situation. It should never be countenanced by any politician of any respect. We have the right to tell our politicians the ones we elect should serve us, nothing else, and they should listen to our concerns. And I personally think, like the majority of my friends and colleagues, believe that these concerns are very genuine, long overdue for attention, and we should take due notice. They should take due notice of what we say.
And absolutely. And in Ireland lately, it's quite astonishing. So we've had an enormous kind of over migration problem for the last few years. And it seemed to really kick off after the whole kind of cerveza sickness, which we call C19, because YouTube now won't allow you to even say it without demonetization. Crazy. But the videos lately coming out are the building of huge camps for migrants. But all of the video clips that people have are quite muscular young men, often with their heads covered, going in as the building goes on. And it's quite clear now, and admitted in the official figures in Ireland, that overwhelmingly the migration the last few years is kind of strong young men. And the women and children can't really see them anywhere. So what's with the whole persecution or Ukraine or any of this stuff? It's clearly and self-evidently nonsense. It's all young men pretty much.
Well, whether you're in Ireland or in Britain, it doesn't matter. I think this level of migration, illegal as it is not sustainable. I think the West is actually quite a hospitable place for people who are fleeing wars and various sorts of difficulties. But it should be controlled. It should be at a rate at which they can assimilate into, well, the society can assimilate them, and they could accommodate the different values. But we have all and sundry coming because of the attraction of prosperity. They come seeking wealth, but they have no respect for the existing culture, the mores, the way the system is run. It's it tantamounts to invasion in quite a lot of respects. We shouldn't be countenancing that. The people who want to migrate do so legally and properly. They come through proper channels with their passports, apply for settlement status, find jobs, whatever it is. They have to do it properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And this asylum thing, which I kind of touched on there, again, what happened women and children first? What happened proper application for asylum when arriving, with documents to be authentic? Overwhelmingly in Ireland, it's acknowledged, and I think the UK is the same, it's illegal. And when you
Yeah.
scratch the surface, even in the slightest, you don't find asylum. I mean, Ireland is over 50% now. African countries, actually over 50% Nigeria and Pakistan, neither of which are war-torn. And
No.
that's over 50%. That's just for starters. So it's dominated by economic migrants and illegal migrants. It just makes no sense, the line that the government is saying, where they keep talking virtue signaling and asylum type wording.
It doesn't make any sense at all. I think my concern, and I'm sure it's a concern of the Irish people as well as the British ones, that the incoming groups are inherently not particularly respectful of the system that's prevalent, the values that we hold dearly, the sort of conditions we fought to achieve over the years. It creates potential friction, and those who are expressing anxiety over these, unfortunately, they are inflamed, not us. They are inflamed by politicians who had the temerity to label them as far right. I think that's the most nasty way of labeling people.
Yeah, I mean, that is, to me, it's quite simply traitorous,
Yes,
because the politicians, or puppeticians, as I call them now, because I think essentially it's an open secret that
yes,
overwhelmingly our puppeticians report up to the UN, EU, and all the other groups that are kind of organizing this world government play. But if you go back 2015, I think it was, Soros did a big document on the WF website and published elsewhere, where he calls out how Europe must take millions and millions of migrants from East Africa and Africa and all these places in the coming years. And it's an imperative. And he even lays out how the EU has to put aside 15,000 in 2015 money for each one, and start putting together a multi-billion-dollar budget for this, because it must happen. Now, he couches it in all the talk of saving granny and all the other nonsense. You know they're lying through their teeth. But
yes.
the UN also had a document, I think in 2017 or 19, 170-page PDF on migration policy. And again, it's a huge document saying mass migration into the EU is needed. Numbers need to be huge. And they kind of put it off based on future pensions and repopulation or replacement. So all of this stuff is published, but it's published from Soros, WEF, UN, EU Commission, maybe, all these top unelected bureaucrats. And our politicians who are voted in by us for our interests, they seem to be just reporting direct to unelected bodies. So democracy is completely bypassed, completely.
Indeed, absolutely scandalous. So we need to do something about it. Back in 2021, September 25th, 2021, Mike Hookham and I set up the what we call the Belmont Declaration, name after the hotel where we met. We invited Reclaim, Reform, SDP, Heritage, various parties who are non-establishment parties to meet and agree a format going forward, how to unite the people of this country to ensure that we have politicians that serve the needs. So we had Time Party as the first party to seek a merger with us, and that was duly completed. And then a year later, we had talks with Freedom Alliance, and they were on the verge of joining us to become one. The name was going to be changed, but unfortunately, at the last hour, one of them had cold feet and withdraw. Fast forward to the 6th of April this year, 5 other parties met with us in a place called Bromyard in Herefordshire, and we decided to have a non-aggression pact to start with because we were approaching the general election. So these 5 other parties are Freedom Alliance, again, under new leadership, English Democrats, under Robin Tobruk, Libertarian Party under Martin Day, and we have a small party called the Populist Party, led by Russell White, and an even smaller party that's located in Crewe, called Putting Crewe and Nantwich First. And that's led by a former UKIP councillor called Councillor Brian Sylvester. We are meeting again on the 24th of this month to decide the best way going forward in terms of consolidating what we achieved in the past few months. We actually showed that the non-aggression system does work, and a mutual support system also works. So we're going to take it further forward. So we have 6 parties, small parties, very keen to serve the people to ensure that going forward we will not let the likes of the World Economic Forum, the WHO, enslave us, impoverish us, and deal all sorts of measures with impunity without some sort of resistance.
Yeah, that's great news, Teck, because that's exactly what's needed. I've been watching this, well, mainly since 2020, obviously, when the whole madness really got underway. But the problem is that the forces driving towards world government and all of the totalitarian madness that sadly is being pushed on us, they're all unified with huge, huge finances. I mean, unbelievable.
And they have the
And they're
backing
all
of media. They have the backing of the media.
the
Totally,
media is
totally
bought and paid
captured.
for. Yeah, the media in the swine flu debacle in 2009, which is the same guys, it collapsed because the media began to actually report honestly on it and say, hold on a minute, and ask questions. Since then, clearly over a decade, the media has been completely subverted. So that's a headwind too. But they've got all this money and all this power without question and influence with all the young global leaders in the WEF. All of our leading politicians have been through the indoctrination. They're all in it together, so to speak, in the true sense. But on our side, pushing back against this lunacy, we're fractures. We're all different pockets and groups, and some of them sadly fall for genuine conspiracy theory nonsense, and then they lose the plot. So it's been very frustrating for me as a corporate guy, a rationalist, and a data guy to watch this, and also a psychology guy. I've managed people for decades, to watch this broken up mess that I think now is beginning, finally, thankfully, to come together. So what you're describing there is exactly what's needed. You got to weed out the people who are kind of off the wall or overly conspiracy theorish, because they're damaging to any movement.
Yes.
And you've got to align people and weed out the people who are going to light their own, their own candle. The people who are really in it for themselves.
Yes.
And then you just got to get all the people, which is the majority on the good side, to just not compete with each other and not squabble with each other and join together to make at least a mass, because we need a mass.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said. We need a critical mass, and it can be done. I want to reassure the 5 other partners of the Belmont partnership that we don't need the money. We need to be very local and get very personal with the electors on the ground. Yeah. And I firmly believe there is an opportunity with close liaison with people, sincere close liaison with the people who are likely to vote for you. And you can convert them. You can actually tell them where the system is going wrong, why it's going wrong, explain to them in a sincere manner. And eventually you win them over. And there is a domino effect, because I would start with our dearest and nearest and dearest, start with family, friends, colleagues. You don't have to do a lot. But when the penny drops, then they will tell somebody else. And hopefully that circle of influence, that circle of conviction increases, and we'll get a movement being spawned from just a simple, tiny voice.
Yeah, and it was
I'm
always
inspired. I'm not sure whether you heard. I'm inspired by what the Italians did in Italy with the 5M5S, 5-star movement.
hmm,
Or we can do it. We do it locally. We do it humbly, but patiently, and we'll achieve that.
yeah. No, I have faith in that, and I'm a lot more positive than I was. I mean, in late 22, I think I just really wondered, this battle is so tiring. The abuse you get is endless.
Yes.
And I began to think, my God, how are people not waking up? Because it's so self-evident and obvious. It drives me crazy what's being done. But then 23 and now into 24, I'm a lot more positive. And the tipping point, well known in literature, 10 or 12% of strong feeling people who have a bit of dedication towards changing the world for the better and are pretty much aligned. That's where you can get a tipping point and begin to convert en masse and awaken the others en masse. But when you're at 2 or 3% of that class, it's very hard because the corrupt legacy media can drown it out. But we're only talking 10 or 11% of pretty on the ball awake people who are active and speaking at the water cooler about the realities of what's going on. And then we can get tipping point. And I think just a quick word, because I know we're keeping this short, but maybe your thoughts on the censorship, because I see as a positive thing, perversely, the forces and the powers that be are rushing and tripping over each other and even making mistakes in trying to
Yeah.
get censorship, surveillance, ID cards in. And I think, Streisand effect perhaps, but it's almost going to help us as they show their hand in the most absurd ways. What do you think of this whole desperation on the part of the so-called elite to ram in insane laws on censorship and free speech?
Well, eventually it will get to the sensible people, as you say. We will realize that these things are not tenable, not sustainable. What it is we should be ready. We should be ready to react in ways that are acceptable, in ways that are compelling. We have to, for example, look at history. We have to look at how Mahatma Gandhi did it, how Martin Luther King Jr. did it in America, and we may have to resort to civil disobedience on a large scale. But going back to my point earlier about getting local and going very personal with the people around us, I think it's important for people to get the message now. In my humble way, I would have left politics under all the pressure, all the censorship. I mean, it's easy enough for my family to say, "Why do you put your head above the parapet and get shot?" But when you've been dyed in the wool physician caring for people, when you see your first case in casualty of a 15-year-old healthy boy, previously healthy boy, developing myocarditis a couple of weeks after the COVID jab, you think something is desperately wrong. When you see the coroner certifying Lisa Shaw's death as being attributed to the COVID vaccine, there is something very wrong, certainly something very unconscionable going on, something very evil going on. How many more deaths, how many more harms do we need before we call a moratorium? Now, I asked for a moratorium back in November 2020. But I'm just a little voice, I'm a little GP, who would care? But I have to be patient and I have to be strong, and I want supporters to be strong with me. And we all stand together side by side. We have to fight this evil.
Absolutely, because your children will be next, as the old phrase goes. There's
Yes.
no question that whole debacle. I mean, I interviewed Dr. David Grimes, the UK octogenarian doctor, lovely man,
Yeah.
met him last year in person, and a couple of his colleagues. And in late 2020, our podcast highlighted, even before those products were released, it was clear that there would be issues with them just from the technology. And it was
Yes.
clear that people would need to be high in 25 OHD for their immune system to handle the assault, or there would be problems. So we tried to get the message out.
Mhm.
But it was obvious within a few months of early data from Professor Norman Fenton's analysis that
Yes.
the products were delivering almost nothing. I
Yes.
mean, they were delivering almost nothing. I mean, the
Not
curve of
nothing. They were
the
delivering nothing in terms of the purported
positive.
benefits, but they were delivering harm. That's the most unconscionable thing I came across.
Exactly, but in terms of benefits, exactly, precisely, no
Yeah.
benefit. I mean, the curve of the cerveza sickness progression across the world was moving. The magic sauce kind of products came in, and the
Yes.
curve, without the slightest shimmy, continued with a
Yes.
beautiful spline.
Yeah.
It was clear as crystal, and Norman Fenton's work just closed the case completely, his deep analysis. So
Yes.
there's no benefit. And by definition, obviously, any powerful medication into the system causing a major immune reaction is going to cause a massive flurry of harm. It's just the price of a medication. So you hope that the benefit is really huge.
Yeah.
This one was just insane from the start.
Hmm.
Crazy. So, is there any other key things you'd like to get out to supporters and indeed the public in general, particularly in the UK, of course, around where we are and where we're going?
Well, what I would say is try and keep in touch with us through various available social media platforms. I think the scope of these will be eventually reduced. I'm very delighted that Elon Musk is so
Mm.
far holding out, and we still have a platform that we can be open, but at least circumspect in what we say. Um, but the most important thing is to maintain personal contact. And that is something which will beat surveillance.
Yeah,
So
real world
if we
contact.
met exactly, if we met in pubs and clubs, and spoke to each other in person, there is no substitute. A, you determine people's sincerity. B, you understand people's commitment. And C, you can go forward with the conviction that you are on the right path.
Ah, beautiful words, Tech. Excellent. And something I've said myself so many times. And Dr. Nordengard, Jakob Nordengard in Sweden, who did the
Yeah.
amazing PhD and work on the Rockefellers and all the other groups like WEF,
Yes.
in stunning work. He has always said that as well. We need to go back to real life connection. And
Yeah.
he's been identified in supermarkets in Sweden by people who come up and shake his hand. I've had five, six people in Ireland in the last 2 weeks, similarly. Real world connection is what makes people feel they're part of a good tribe and a real movement. But the internet, look, it's useful. We got to use it. It's a tool. They use it, but it's not the real thing. So I love that, Tech. That's fantastic.
Right. And if I have to end this interview, I would say my friends and colleagues stand shoulder to shoulder with the Irish people, freedom-loving Irish people, and you have all our support.
Oh, thanks so much, and humbly ditto. And we'll help get your message out. Of course, I'll release this in the next day or two pretty quickly. And again, in the real life theme, Ledbury, 29th, 30th October, I'll send, or August, coming in a week and a
Yes,
bit. Um, we'll be meeting up for a couple of shows. So I'm going to cover health and all of the health stuff from our book and longevity, etc. And then I'll cover a lot of the geopolitics and a lot of these items. So we're going to have a blast in Ledbury. But I
yeah.
get this message out, Tech, and you just send me your best links. So I'll put them on the screen at some point during this interview.
Thank you very much. The party is adfparty.uk.
adfparty.uk
Yeah.
or .co.uk?
No,
No,
no, just
.uk.
adfparty.uk.
Excellent.
Lovely,
Thanks
sweet.
so much,
Well, wish
Tech.
you all the best. Wish you all the best, Ivor. And
You
if I
too,
find
man.
time,
Good man.
I might even see you in Ledbury.
Oh, excellent. The more the
Good.
merrier. Beautiful. Thank
All
you.
the best. Thank you,
Bye
Ivor.
now.
God bless.
That'll do it, folks. And what an impressive gentleman Dr. Khong is. So adfparty.uk. So everyone in the UK should be getting in there and supporting him and the rest of the guys to save all of our freedoms. And it's getting headwindy these days, you know, demonetization, even if you mention surveys of sickness, and a load of other stuff. But we'll get through it and we will prevail in the end. But anyone who can help support on Patreon or PayPal, I do vlogs a couple of times a month with loads of extra free content, and also do Zoom meetings with certain levels of patrons once a month as well. And they're always packed with great conversations and Q&A and all that stuff. So anyone who can support, really appreciate it. And a huge thanks to my existing supporters. Thank you.